Would any of you like to comment on that struggle internally and how you deal with that?
I mean, I guess the thing I'd say is thank goodness I don't have to work in your company. I mean, we are consensus-based, but we tend to do it all together in a pretty concentrated amount of time. So whenever we develop a copy strategy, whenever we are evaluating creative, whenever we are looking at rough cuts, all those steps where you have key decisions that have to be made, one of the principles that we established several years ago is the ultimate decision maker needs to be in the room. And other people come and opine and give their points of view, and it is somewhat consensus-oriented in that regard. It's not, a single dictator sort of making all of the decisions without any input, but it's all done in that meeting.
Are there any competing interests that you face when you're in that meeting? Any other particular struggles internally that you have to deal with?
Yeah, always.
Yeah,
Always.
definitely.
But the point is you thrash it out. We have lived with a lot of pain over the years, and this is something we also learned in the general market, so this isn't a Hispanic thing only, is that we could just tumble and tumble and tumble and don't get to a point of actionability. And that's where we installed this rule that the decision maker has got to be in the room.
Well, our decision-making process at the Milk Processor Board is even more streamlined, I'm happy to say. It's still done by consensus, but the consensus is among 11 board members who represent all of the California milk processors who fund this campaign. So when we have work that is a little off, a little edgy, a little off-center, sometimes it's a struggle to get the board, who are made up of, and they wouldn't mind my saying this, they're a bunch of middle-aged white guys, because I was there as chairman for 8 years before I assumed this position as executive director. They have they're dairy guys, they run dairies, and they're operations guys, but I credit them with having the trust and the imagination and frankly, the intestinal fortitude to go ahead and say, you know what, that looks like a great idea. I don't understand it because I'm not a marketing person, but if you're telling me that the research is solid and the work is solid and it will communicate the message we want to communicate, then let's go. It's a very enthusiastic board, and we just literally have to get the approval of that board. And then, of course, the approval of the California Department of Food and Agriculture, because we are a government entity, and sometimes that's more of a struggle than getting the approval and the consensus of our board. But it's a very streamlined process, and I'm very proud of this board over the years with some of the edgy communications strategies and executions over the years.
Good. Well, within your organization, sometimes you have different for Toyota, different divisions, different dealerships, different models, same thing with Clorox. And how do you manage multiple brands across various consumer segments?
Me first? Sure. We have a pretty detailed prioritization process that we go through every year, where we take a very critical look at key strategic factors for each model. And we basically set a priority based on that. So we start every year understanding which of our models are, because we have 17 models, are first tier and will get the highest level of support, which are second tier and which are third tier. We like to say internally we have a lot of children to feed with the dollars that we have, but all the children get fed. Some of them are a little fatter than others. So we try to take that approach, but it's a pretty detailed investigation that we go through every year.
So not all of our children are fed. For us, it starts at the strategic level. So we have a strategy that we put in place and updated a couple years ago for how we're going to grow the Hispanic business at Clorox. And one of the key vectors that we looked at was which of our brands, we have like 25 different brands that we put out in the United States, are really going to be the focus of Hispanic effort. And the number today is 7. And we have aspirations to get that up to about 9 or 10 over the next few years. We've identified, some rising star kind of children, but that's all we focus on. We are, a classic brand management structured organization. So each of those businesses have sort of their own running sort of structure behind them. So we're able to plug in to the planning processes that that are attached to each of those brands and work with them to create the Hispanic component.
Great.
So we don't really have a dilemma about budgets and all that kind of stuff, because it's sort of already preset through the strategy and the long-range planning process we have, which really helps a lot. Yeah.
And speaking of it makes it easy, what makes it easy for me and the Milk Processor Board is that we are, even though we have a brand DNA, we like to talk about what it is to be part of Got Milk and Toma Leche. We aren't a brand. We don't represent any specific brand of dairy processor in California. So we have the luxury of just being a commodity advertising and promotion organization, and our only focus is to sell and promote the consumption of one more glass of milk a day. By all of our existing consumers, we're not necessarily trying to convert people, because that we feel is with our limited budget, is probably an uphill battle. If you're not a fan of milk, you probably won't start drinking milk just because of a great commercial. But if you do drink milk or you're, let's say, a mom who's in charge of, she's the gatekeeper, she's putting the milk in the fridge, on the table, telling the kids both verbally and by example that milk is good for them, we're trying to give those consumers just one more piece of knowledge that will convince them that maybe one more glass of milk, one more occasion for drinking milk would be in their best interest. So we don't have brands to worry about, but the flip side of that is we can't be very specific and very tactical about our message. It has to be a broad-based message, and it's only fluid milk. We don't, our mission, our sort of mandate from the state of California is to promote fluid milk. There are other organizations that promote, cheese and cottage cheese and yogurt and sour cream. So once again, we have a very limited focus, which to a marketer, I think is a great luxury.
And Steve was very happy earlier because Tony said his son drinks 5 gallons of milk a week.
No, the family consumes
the family,
5 gallons
5
of milk.
gallons of
Yes,
milk a
that's
week, so he was
good
thrilled
news.
about that.
I'm going to hope to get a discount before I'm done today.
Yeah. Good luck.
As his,
Those milk prices have really gone up, by the way, let me tell you.
I know.
as Hispanic market agencies, we're always interested in how you deal with those conflicts among your multiple agencies. Those of you that have multiple agencies, tell me, how do you deal with conflicts, whether it's on strategy, whether it's on the creative? How do you deal with those?
I wouldn't say we actually have too many conflicts, at least in my time. What we try to do is to create an environment as a client where, all agencies have access to the same amount of information, the same degree of product knowledge, the same amount of research support, and so I think that serves as an empowerment, an opportunity to empower all of the agencies to do their best in their particular segments. So I think what we try to do is put everybody on an even keel. We have our management structure, our advertising management structure is such that the same manager who's working on the general market is working on the Hispanic work. So it's all very well integrated, and I think that helps to make sure that everybody's sort of on the same playing field, but still understands that they're taking ownership for their segments.
Tony, do you
So
encounter
Clorox, anybody that's ever related with Clorox in any fashion, the first thing they say to you when they say, well, what do you think of that company, is like, oh my gosh, they're so analytical, okay? And that is true, right? We don't apologize for that, I guess is what I'd say. But that allows us to deal with this situation, amongst other things, I think, pretty dispassionately. So the budgets, you talked about that piece. We know how hard dollars work in the general market and in the Hispanic market when we invest, okay? So we have optimization models and all that kind of stuff that gets run that tells us this is the right budget for Hispanic and this is the right budget for the general market.